Hi, Dorit.
Hi, Anand.
How are you today?
I'm good. And you?
I'm good. It's great to have you here.
It's an honor to be included in this fantastic series of podcasts.
Well, that's my pleasure. So, today my guest is Dorit Hochbaum. She's a distinguished professor in industrial engineering and operations research at UC Berkeley. Her research interests are in areas of discrete optimization, network flow techniques, data mining, image segmentation, supply chain management, and efficient utilization of resources. She's the author of over 190 papers that appeared in the operations research, management science, and theoretical computer science literature. She served as a department editor for Management Science Department of Optimization and Modeling and on a number of editorial boards. Dorit was named in 2004 as Honorary Doctorate of Sciences of the University of Copenhagen for her work on approximation algorithms. She was appointed the Pinhas Naor Lecturer of the Technion for 2013 and a Research Excellence Professor at the University of Vienna in 2007. She's the winner of the 2011 Informs Computing Society Prize for her work on algorithms for image segmentation. Dorit is a Fellow of Informs and a Fellow of SCIEM. In 2024, she was awarded the Cashion Prize by the Informs Optimization Society for her extensive contributions to optimization, including her work on the design and analysis of algorithms and their applications across various domains. Dorit, thank you very much for accepting the invitation, really. So let's start. Dorit, you were born in Israel. Which region of the country do you come from?
It's a funny question because it's a very small country. The whole country is like one region, but I was born smack in the center in Tel Aviv.
All
Yeah.
right. And what can you share about your family background? I know it's very interesting.
Um, so you refer to my parents,
Yes.
and like many people of their generation, they went through Second World War. They, in fact, got married in Warsaw. My father was brought up in Germany, and German was his mother tongue, and my mother was in Warsaw, and Polish was her mother tongue. And they got married in Warsaw in 39. Actually, my cousin that was 11 years old and his mom, my aunt, came from Israel to attend it also. And they moved shortly after that for a job my father had with family in eastern Poland. And that pretty much what saved them because very short time afterwards, the Germans invaded and took over Warsaw and the west of Poland, and the Russians took over the east of Poland, which was where they were. And the Russians took them, like they did many Poles, and to labor camps in Siberia. It took a long time before I found out about it, but I did find out that they had a girl there, a daughter, and she died of starvation and disease when she was 2 years old while they were there. At some point, Stalin made an arrangement with Colonel Anders to establish Polish units because it was running short of soldiers, and that was the arrangement was to release Poles from the camps with their families in return for them, the men joining those units. So my parents left on that, and I found out pretty recently that my father defected from that, and they ended up in Kazakhstan. I don't know how. And then my father probably joined the British Army. He was driving trucks to Cairo, and my mother ended up in Tehran. And at some point, he defected from the British Army, and his sister and her son, I was very close to, he actually lived not too far from Berkeley, so we were in close touch until he died a few years back. remembers that they arranged to hide him under another name and in a kibbutz. And my mother arrived as a chaperone of the children of Tehran. That's more or less what I know. And even that I know, they never told me that. They belong to most of the people of their generation that prefer not to talk about it. And I have to say that a lot of fault lies with me because I was not interested at all. To me, I had my own world and my friends, and my parents seemed to belong to another world. They even didn't speak Hebrew very well. So that was also an issue. And I regret it greatly, but this is what it was. They probably did it to protect me. And I have many other friends that didn't know anything and some friends that did know stuff.
Wow. Yeah. What a story. And what did they do for a living?
So my mother was working. She I think when they left, she was doing a master in chemistry, actually in quantum. I don't think she finished it. She didn't graduate, but she was like, chemistry was her background, and she joined the National Health Service. At the time, there was only one, and was running a hematological lab in the local clinic. And she was working there, and also the work there was really strange by today's standards. People were working until 2:00, and then there was a break, lunch break or nap break until 4:00, and then they would come back. And even banks were like that. They were closed for this mid-afternoon siesta. And but of course, the place where she worked was like less than 10 minutes walk. So by today's standards, you can't do stuff like that. But that was her work day.
And what about your father?
My father owned the electronic parts store, and that was not too far from where we lived. Yeah.
Yes. So you grew up not aware of all those war stories and so on, right?
Completely unaware. And again, my fault, mea culpa, completely uninterested.
Yeah.
I thought that my parents don't understand anything about me. And
yes. And do you have siblings?
Yes, I have an older sister, and she's very different from me in every which way, including in appearance. She's blonde. She looks more like my mother, and I'm more like my father, darker. And she is also humanities and linguistics. She has a master's degree in linguistics, and she's well known in Israel for. She's also artistic. She did very nice pieces of work, and she's known in Israel for television series that she wrote, and some of them are very ingrained in the Israeli psyche.
Wow, that's amazing. So you come from a really special family. So many talented people. Very nice. And speaking of your early years, what memories do you have from that period?
So I grew up in a neighborhood that was really guys mostly. I had my best girlfriend. We were friends since we moved there, which I was about almost 4 years old. And I see her and talk to her very frequently. Actually, I was in Israel 2 weeks ago, and we spent a lot of time together. But mostly the neighborhood was boys, and I was playing with them, and a lot of soccer playing, but they were putting me down. Actually, one of my neighbors, he became a professional soccer player, and he was running the team, and he told me to be a goalie, and I wanted to be advanced, and he said, until you roll properly in the dust, you won't be promoted. And although, it was when we grew up, goalie was considered the lowliest position, although I know that it's very important. So he ended up having a professional career in soccer, and I did not.
It's incredible. So you grew up in a neighborhood full of boys that played soccer and you were a goalkeeper. Incredible. Is it true that you had an agreement with your mom? You would get a haircut so she could give you a bike as a gift?
First of all, I had long hair that was tied up in a braid, and it was a big task. First of all, it was a big task. I was never a morning person, never.
Yes,
and my
I can
mother
relate
said,
to that.
"Oh, when are you going to get married? And your husband will wake you up, or your kids will wake you up. And when are you going to cut your hair? Because it's so difficult to brush it in the morning and to tie it in a braid." And by the way, she was right. I ended up that my kids are waking me up. And also, when I was in my military service, I had my girlfriend who comes from a German family, so time is very important to them. And I had a shift that starts at 4 a.m. and she started at 6 a.m. and we were in the same room. So she would wake up at 4 just to wake me up because she was nervous that without her I won't make it.
So you had a human alarm.
Yeah. So my mother was right about it, but she was kept complaining, when will you cut your hair? When will you cut your hair? When will you cut your hair? And then she said, I had my bat mitzvah, that's 12. And she said, I'll give you this bike. I wanted a bike for the bat mitzvah if you cut your hair. So I went with my girlfriends. We were a quintet. There were 5 of us that were always hanging together. And all of them came with me to the hairdresser. I had my hair cut. I still have the braid in a drawer right behind me. And my mother bought me a bike. And not too long after that, I was never educated in the rules of traffic, and no one bothers to teach kids about that. So I took my girlfriend having sitting behind me. Above the wheel, there was a seat, so she was sitting there, and we were going downhill, and there was a stop sign, but what do I know? And some of my family say that I still don't know. And I could see a car was coming also downhill in a crossing street, but I figured that I can make it. Well, I was wrong. I crossed, and the car hit the back wheel, and both of us flew in the air. And nothing much, and the bike also, nothing much happened. And quite a number of people congregated there to see what happened. And we pretended to be bystanders also, because I was super afraid that my parents will find
That's so
out, that
funny.
their parents will find out. And unfortunately, there was a guy there, the guy that taught me how to ride. He was a son of my mother's friend, and he figured it out, and he ratted us out. And my girlfriend's parents were very mad, and my mother took the bike and sold it. And but still, me and our family are huge bike people. Huge bike people. My kids are semi-professional. Yeah.
Wow.
And I have a grandkid who is super serious with biking. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. And do you have any other interesting story with your mom?
Yes. When I was little, maybe 6, maybe 7, I was playing with my friends. As I mentioned, all of them were boys. And we climbed on a tree. And then they pushed me off the tree, and I fell, and I had a gash in my thigh. And I was so mad. And I thought, and my mother was at home. I thought, okay, I'm going to get her. And I went home, I was crying, and she said, what nerve they have. I thought she'll beat them up, and I was so happy. And she's coming with me. She pulls me by the hand, and I have to mention that I was wearing a skirt. In those times, girls were mostly wearing skirts. So she screams at them, "What have you done?" And look, and she lifts my skirt to show them. And they were cackling, and I mean, I was so humiliated. How could you do it? I never asked her for help again with my friends. I can get on my own. Thank you very much. Much better than that. Yeah.
Yeah, that gives an idea on your relationship with your mom. That's nice.
Yeah.
And what did you like to read back in the day?
Well, I was into adventure, detective story, murder, mystery, horror, and I was reading Tarzan stories. They were sold once in 2 weeks. There was a pamphlet with another story. And it was not just Tarzan in Africa, it covered, I mean, this Tarzan was everywhere, in the pyramids and in South America, all over the place. And it had many interesting things that, like how he learned to read, for instance. So he was using the zip frequency to figure out. So I learned a lot of stuff from that, and I really liked it. And I like to read biography of scientists and inventors. I had a book about inventors that I think I read maybe 50 times from beginning to end, time and again.
Yeah.
And
so you're an avid reader. That's great.
Yeah.
And what about movies?
So movies, again, I was going to movies like Psycho, that many of my friends refused to go because it's too scary. And I remember seeing West Side Story in the theater, and I thought this was the most amazing movie ever. And I still think so, actually. I saw it not too long ago again. It's really an amazing movie.
Yes, it's a classic. And did you enjoy going to school?
In general, yes, I really liked school. So elementary school, I was considered good in math, and the math teacher was actually our principal. And he had this idea. He was sitting at the desk, and as I remember, he was eating matzo sandwiches that his wife gave him so he would lose weight. And he would give us some math problem, and the kid that finish it, once they finish it, you run to him to get an approval. And if you are correct and you are number one, then you win. I mean, it was just an honor thing. There was no material compensation for that. But so I was often running, and often I was the first one, and I really loved it. So I loved the mathematics, and in high school, I liked also other things, even Talmud studies I loved, and I was very good at that. I got perfect score in the matriculation exam in the Talmud studies.
Yeah, I'm not surprised at all. And tell me about a chemistry lab incident involving one of your friends.
So that was in high school. So in high school, we had a club, like me and some guys, that to do chemistry experiments. We mostly like to do explosions and stuff like that. And it was hard for us to get enough money to buy the materials. So, and I was popular because I kind of stole from my mother's lab testing tubes, which we needed. So that saved some money, but it was state property, so that was a theft. And so one of us, he decided to steal, but from the school lab, iodine. And he did it at the end of class, chemistry class, and he put it in his pocket.
That's a good idea.
And suddenly his pocket became purplish, the stain. So not only he shouldn't have done it in the first place, but this was, if you do it, you should know the properties of iodine.
I think he never forgot that, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
never forgot this lesson. Yes.
And Dorit, you began your mandatory military service at around 17 and a half years old, right?
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, I was, but I was in a special unit that you go with other people, and you basically go to kibbutzim or settlements. Today, settlements is a bad word, but at the time it was like new kibbutzim to establish. So we went first to a kibbutz called Mefalsim. It's actually close to Gaza, and it was affected on October 7th. And there we were supposed to learn how to do various tasks. And then we went to in the Sinai desert. There was a place close to El Arish. This was while Sinai, after the Six-Day War, and before Israel returned it to Egypt. And that was great. I mean, so you have like 100 people young, all of them are bright, all of them are a lot of fun. It was great. And I was considered always academic, even in this first kibbutz. They gave me to teach, to prepare high schoolers to the matriculation exams. So that was my agricultural work.
Okay.
And in the settlements, I did, there was a professor from Agricultural Institute that was making experiments on irrigation methods. And I was the one implementing the experiments and checking moisture and I sent the others to do all sort of, to weigh the weight of the cucumbers and stuff like that, or melons that you get from different methods. Recently, my son, we were talking something about irrigation, and I said something, and my son said, "Well, what do you know about irrigation? Are you an expert?" And I said, "Well, surprisingly, I am." Yes. I worked on it for a while, and with academic expertise. Yes. So that was a lot of fun. And then we went for an established kibbutz in the Negev near Beersheba. And after that, after I was done with the compulsory service, it was longer than that of the standard service for women. So it was 2 years.
Wow.
I went to the university and to study. Yeah.
Uh-huh. And you have a math degree from Tel Aviv University, but at first you were taking 3 majors at the same time, weren't you?
Yes, because I couldn't decide. I loved so much physics. I had a great high school teacher in physics. So I loved physics and I loved chemistry and I loved math, and I couldn't make up my mind. So I took all 3. But then I dropped physics. I dropped first. Coriolis was my coup de grace. I couldn't. And also in physics at Tel Aviv University, they always say, here is the setup, and now we guess a solution. They always guess solutions like e to the power, some power, and then plug it in, and then it works out. And I hated these guessing solutions. But then it was, to me, it was at the university, all the intuition was gone, and it was just, not for me.
Mhm.
And so I left it after a year. And chemistry was harder for me to quit because I really loved it, and it translated into my love of cooking. That is chemistry, basically. So, but I couldn't take all the load. So after a while, I quit chemistry also and stayed with mathematics. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And any experience with OR at that time?
Nothing. It was not mentioned. And actually, I took a course on writing a compiler for machine language, but it was assembler, compiler in assembler. That's where I started with programming.
Ah.
And
So did you have the chance to learn how to program during your undergrad years then?
Oh yeah. And I got totally, well, this was assembler, but then Fortran we were using heavily. But I got totally addicted to it. I would actually carry with me the printouts, and like today, the students sit in class and they look at the phone. I sat in class and I looked at the printout, and I couldn't wait to get the next printout. And I was seriously addicted to it. And part of I think I'm also addicted to driving. When I learned to drive, I like it so much. It's like being able to magnify your power, and programming gives you that. Yeah. So.
Yeah, very interesting perspective. And after completing your degree, you moved to Jerusalem for your master's at the Hebrew University. I guess that's when you first got in touch with OR, right?
Yes, I took a course actually in economics. I totally did not expect it to be particularly interesting. And that's where I heard the first time of shadow prices and of linear programming. He did not quite teach linear programming, but he said it counts. And I thought that I still do. I just couple of weeks ago, I taught it to my undergraduate, and I still find it amazingly fascinating. Yes.
Mm-hmm. And it was during your time at the Hebrew University that you met someone very famous in our field. Could you share your memories of that event?
Okay, so there was the Yom Kippur War, and I think Dantzig came to the Hebrew University as a show of support. Actually, a lot of my classmates were not there. They were on reserve. And he was teaching, of course, in English. And Israelis at the time were not very, very fluent in English. So I was asked, like, I'm the perfect English speaker. I was asked to translate, and I made lecture notes in Hebrew based on his lectures. Yeah.
So a lot of work.
Yeah, well, I don't remember that it was anything onerous. So I had an opportunity to interact with him. Yeah.
And what motivated you to move to the US for your higher studies, and how did you end up at the University of Pennsylvania?
Okay, so first of all, I wanted to go to the US just for adventure sake, just to be different. And in fact, when I was thinking of going for a graduate degree in mathematics, and I applied and I got into Berkeley, but then I got cold feet that going to Berkeley on my own and being there alone, so it didn't attract me very much. But then I met the guy who is my husband now, and we actually moved in together. He was in Weizmann Institute, and we both decided that we want to go. And he was in a very specific area. He still works in this area, liquid crystal displays. And there were pretty much just 3 universities that specialize in that. And one of them was Temple University. And he applied and got scholarship and stipend. And so I decided to apply as well. At the time, I was thinking that the most attractive to me was functional analysis. So we came. Actually, it was quite a shock to come to Philadelphia. I told him, I want to go home right now, not tomorrow, right now. The first day we came to Philadelphia. So I spent 1 semester in Temple, and I decided that's not for me, something more exciting. And I remember the operations research, the shadow prices, and all of this. So I went to University of Pennsylvania. Actually, there was something like OR department at the time. Tom Saati was at the department. And I went to talk to them. They said, but I needed support. At Temple, I had support. And so he said, why don't you go to the department was called Decision Sciences. Today it's called something like Operation something. So I went there, I crossed the street, and the chair of the department, Paul Kleindorfer, was very excited about taking me. Apparently, I had fantastic letters, including from the famous economics professor from whom I learned about shadow prices. So he said, well, why don't you come here instead? And I think business school. And he said, oh, you can do whatever you want. He forgot to say that, to mention that I need to do accounting, marketing, organizational behavior, operations management.
There was a catch then.
Yeah. So, and he said about Marshall Fisher, that ended up being my advisor, that he's doing integer programming. So indeed, I started in Wharton, and was quite an experience. I also took a course with Peter Buneman, that was at the time computer science professor. So I took with him a course on algorithms and complexity, and I was blown away. I mean, I thought this is the best thing ever, and this is really what I want to do. And yeah, so I did my PhD there. At some point, I decided I'm finished, and my husband had, I mean, with the labs, they have very long PhDs. So I applied for position, thinking I'll just need to write up the dissertation. Well, it took me longer than I thought. So I interviewed at what was then Bell Labs in several locations, and also in Carnegie Mellon, that I heard about them, that they are a fantastic place. And then they made me an offer. So I went to Carnegie Mellon, but my husband was still in Philadelphia. So I was there alone for 3 years, yeah.
Wow. So before we speak about your time in Pittsburgh, I know you had to change your surname when you arrived in the US, correct?
Well, I went to the immigration office. As I recall, I needed to get a social security number, and I told the agent there my name, and she said, but you're married, right? And I said, yes. And what's your husband's name? And she said, well, in the US, a woman cannot have her own name. She takes her husband's name. And I was very intimidated by that. So I took his name, which I thought was fine, because I love his family and my in-laws, and I thought that I'm happy to carry their name. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
That
I
was a
wouldn't
bit of
have
a
done
shock.
it on my own. So I have, for my master thesis, I have a paper, but with my maiden name.
Right. That was a bit of a shock to you, right? To be.
Well, I came in general in the US, the attitude to women was quite a lot worse than in Israel. In Israel, I never noticed it. There is some, obviously, but I never quite noticed it. But coming to the US, the contrast was very stark. Yeah.
Yeah. And your PhD research was related to location problems, integer programming, and probabilistic analysis. How did you put all of this together?
Well, first of all, my advisor, Marshall Fisher, he had a specific project, and he had also a grant on the project that was location. It was related to the K-median problem. And then we were doing work on a variant of it that was used on locating databases, essentially on the internet. Essentially, it was on the internet, although this was early, very early days. Actually, University of Pennsylvania was at the time a node on the primitive internet that was at the time. So the idea was that you want users to be able to get quick response to queries. And for that purpose, you want to duplicate the databases. So they'll have availability and closeness that will speed up the query time. But on the other hand, it's like something like CNN or New York Times, if they have multiple places, they need to worry about the integrity, that when they make change, it's everywhere, and that adds cost. So there is a trade-off between these two. And that was the content of the work. So obviously this is location problem. And then I heard about Kraupp's probabilistic analysis. So that's solving under certain conditions, like the traveling salesman problem in the plane when this is uniform distribution. And so certain techniques work in you can prove with probability, with high probability, that you get a very good solution within epsilon from the optimum. Yeah.
Right.
So that had big effect on me to read this. Yes.
Right. And it's fascinating work for sure. And when you moved to Pittsburgh, you decided to buy a house, but faced a bureaucratic obstacle in the process, right?
Well, misogyny, basically. So I went with my husband there, but he was to stay in Philadelphia, and we found a house, and that was by today's standards so cheap, or by California standards so cheap. And we went to get a mortgage and fill up all the paperwork and everything, and then they give it to me to sign as a co-owner. Who is the owner? My husband. And I said, he can't be the owner. First of all, he doesn't have a salary. Secondly, he doesn't even live here. And thirdly, I'm buying the house. And they said, well, this is the way we do it. And I said, no, you'll do it differently. And they bought the bank manager, and he said, well, if you insist, we can do it, but it will take 2 weeks to do again all the paperwork, knowing that this is impossible. So I gave in, and and my husband became the owner, and I'm the co-owner. And I had lots of, even I was invited from it was the business school, GSIA was at the time. Today it's the Tepper School of Business. So I got an invitation, the dean's party, Christmas party, and the invitation on the address, it said, Professor and Mrs. Hochbaum. So even the people that knew me, the administrative staff, they would refer to my husband, not to me.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad things improved. I at least I like to think that it improved, but in a way, I feel sorry that you had to put up with all of that during that time.
I once I was doing a project in information technology class. I wanted to have real projects, and I contacted some company, and I was on the phone, and I asked to speak to someone there, and the receptionist said, who are you? And I said, Professor Hochbaum. And she says, no, what's your name? You work for Professor Hochbaum, but what's your name? Because professor has to be a man.
That's awful. I mean, yes. I mean, I can only imagine the negative experiences that you have accumulated over the years regarding gender issues. Yeah. And while at CMU, you began learning graph theory on your own, which led you to work on an open problem related to a strong perfect graph conjecture. At some point, you asked the one and only Egon Balas, who was a faculty member at CMU, to check one of your proofs. And then the two of you became good friends. What can you share about your relationship with him?
So, Egon, when I came to Carnegie Mellon, whenever he would meet me at the corridor, he would ask me about my husband, that he maybe didn't even meet, I don't remember, but he hardly knew him. But he would ask me, his colleague, about my husband. And he was giving me a hard time. And then it was in the summer that I thought I have some proof, and I knew it was likely to be wrong, but I didn't have anyone to talk to. So I went to him and I showed it to him, and he really loved it. He found the error, but he loved it that I was into it. And after that, we became good friends. And by the way, I mentioned that to him a number of times, and he always denied it, that he was asking me about my husband.
Okay.
He said he never did that, but he
Yeah,
did.
yeah. It's interesting that your husband kept on coming into the picture every time, right? That you have to interact with a man.
And he would also enjoy this misogynistic attitude. So we would go to dinners like with visitors, or we would go to dinner, and in the restaurants, the waiters were also like that. So he really loved it. Of course, he was always the oldest person at the table. And he was also like with a tie and suit, looked very distinguished. And the waiters always came to him. So they said, well, what wine will you select? And he said, she will, she will select. And it was really rattled them quite a bit. And then when it came to pay the check, he said she will pay.
Okay.
And he really enjoyed how
Yeah, at least he didn't say
how
that your husband
uncomfortable
will pay.
they were. What?
At least he didn't say that your husband would pay the bill.
No. He was no. By that time, he got to enjoy this this clear attitude. So Pittsburgh was even worse than Philadelphia. Yeah.
Mhm. And what were your main research contributions during your time at CMU?
So I started. I read the book of Gary and Johnson that made a huge effect on me. And they talk in the book about algorithm of Gavril for vertex cover, that is a two approximation to find maximum matching, and then you take both endpoints of the maximum matching, and it's guaranteed to be a two approximation. But this was unweighted. It was very important that it's unweighted. And I thought, what makes it work? And I wanted to do it for weighted. And then I found essentially what ended up being a primal dual algorithm that I could use for vertex cover, weighted vertex cover, to show two approximation, but also extend this idea generally to set cover. So in vertex cover, the size of the set is 2, but general for set cover. And it gave a bound that is called the frequency, how many sets cover the same element. So this is an approximation bound, which for the case of vertex cover, it is 2.
So you learned all of that on your own?
Pretty much, yes, pretty much on my own.
Very impressive.
And
Yeah.
I spent a lot of time discovering what's happening. And then I met Vacek Vatal, who you interviewed. Actually, I remember when I met him, there was a conference, maybe it was OSA team, something like that, in Hawaii. And we became good friends, and he was mentoring me a lot with, from here I heard about the graph theory and the perfect graph conjecture and all that. So he's been a real inspiration and helped me out also with a paper that I wrote at the time about vertex cover under all sorts of different setups that you get better, like if the graph is 3-colorable, then the vertex cover is, I think it's 1.5 approximation. Yeah, you can get these results to be 1.5 approximation. And then this was the seed. So this and vertex and set cover were like main focus on my research, but this gave rise to something else that, so there is a paper of Nemhauser and Trotter, where they showed the case center problem, the metric case center problem. You can show that if it's non-metric, any approximation value to get any approximation for vertex case center is NP hard. But if the graph is metric, satisfy triangle inequality, then better than 2 approximation is NP hard. And therefore, 2 approximation, if you can get it, it's the best possible. So that stayed in my mind. And also, they heard about vertex cover they had the linear programming relaxation. So essentially, this was also a two approximation because they show you solve linear programming, the weighted vertex cover, and they show the solution is 0, half, or 1 to the linear programming relaxation, which today I have a great generalization of that. But at the time, it was very surprising. And furthermore, those that are 0 in the relaxation and those that are 1s remain so in an optimal solution. So you need only to worry about the halves. But moreover, you don't need to solve the linear programming. And instead, you can solve a minimum cut problem where you duplicate the graph. Well, I won't go too much into details. I'm just taught it in my graduate class last week. This is super non-intuitive. So you solve a minimum cut problem and it gives you 0, 1 half, 1 solution, which is the optimal solution to the linear programming relaxation. And that was important because linear programming, although by that time there was already the ellipsoid method, so it's theoretically you can do it, but in practice it's not a good algorithm, whereas minimum cut is a good algorithm. And so that was very fascinating to me and had a huge impact on my much later career, including things that I'm doing these days.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that later. I'm also glad to know that you got help from Vasek. He's quite a character.
It definitely is.
Yeah. Yes.
Definitely is.
Yeah. And apparently you quit programming because of a dean who said that it softens one's brain.
Yeah, I went to, so that was in Carnegie. I mean, it was not easy for me in Carnegie. They gave me huge teaching load and low salary. So life was pretty hard. But I think I was doing a lot of programming also for my thesis. And I had something of a terminal. I don't quite remember that I had when I was in Philadelphia. And I asked him to get this, and he told me, you shouldn't do such research and computers soften your brain, he told me. And it just because it was very difficult for me to do programming then. I actually, as I told you, I was addicted. And what that meant, I was thinking of some algorithm and immediately I was implementing it and trying it. And I have to thank him for that, actually. Because I was forced to think theoretically about the different algorithms rather than trying them out. And that pretty much was a major turnaround for me, that I pretty much stopped programming. And I loved programming when I did it. So I stopped doing programming, and till today I have others do programming for me. Yeah.
And why did you leave CMU and how did you come to be at UC Berkeley in 1981?
Okay, so my husband at long last graduated, got his PhD, and he got a job in California. And initially, the company he was working for gave him 1 week out of every 4 to go to visit me in Pittsburgh. It was very unsettling because before that we would meet in the weekends. One weekend I would go to Philadelphia, another weekend he would come. But that was very unsettling because, I mean,
yes, the two-body problem.
And I mean, so... but in any case, so this was not a solution for the long run. Plus, I became pregnant. So we need to move in together. So I applied for jobs in California, and I remember Stanford. I spent a year before, the summer before, just visit. I visited Stanford for the summer. In the Department of Operations Research. It doesn't exist now. It was merged into this management engineering. And I loved having the students there. You know, I was teaching this summer course, and I had the students, I mean, they were same age as me, Greg Dobson, Kurt Anstreicher, Tom McCormick, and Richard Stone. Those I remember. Richard Stone ended up going to work for airlines. And all of them were so smart, and we were having such a great time. It was really amazing. So I thought to be in Stanford would be fantastic. So I applied there. And in Berkeley had an open position in information technology. And my thesis was related, and also my very versatile background that Paul Kleindorfer insisted on became very handy. I ended up being very thankful to him. And I like to deal with business problems and supply chain and all of these things. So even though I objected to doing all of this stuff when I had to, I ended up really liking it. And it was beneficial. So I applied to Berkeley, and I didn't hear from them. So I lived alone in this house in Pittsburgh, and I had a cab to take me to the airport. And I go out to the cab and lock the door, and then I hear ringing inside. And should I go in, not go in? I said, the taxi driver, just wait a minute. And I went in. So it was Berkeley, Richard Grinold. And he says, when did you say you are coming to California? And I said, now.
Literally now.
Now. And he said, so we would like to interview you. Thank you very much. We would like to interview you. Do you have time? And I said, well, Wednesday will be okay. So he said, okay, come on Wednesday. And I was pretty ambivalent about this position in the first place, because information technology is not exactly what I wanted to teach. And I was pregnant, but not showing, hopefully. And I was wearing a skirt that my main concern was that I will sneeze and a button will open, it will fly. And
then you're going to remember what happened in your early years, right?
So I went to Stanford, and I expected, the department is not very big, that people from the department will be there, but instead they pulled out a fast one, and I don't know, invited all of computer science, and I had like a big auditorium with lots of people. Don Knuth was sitting there, and I was like terrified. I felt completely paralyzed by fear, and I was presenting the work on the Vertex cover. So that was one presentation. The Santa Clara, I don't remember at all. And then I came to Berkeley, and I didn't think they were serious. What kind of invitation for an interview this is? So I just gave him a piece of my mind. I told them information technology on its own is not really academic research. It is has to tie up to more established discipline. It could be like with economics. It could be with other areas, but I want to show you what it is with optimization. So I was showing them different applications, including the stuff in my thesis that was application to information technology, but with optimization. And they loved it. It turns out that they didn't like the other candidates exactly because of what I was saying. So they wanted to hire me. Then they gave me tenure track position. And I told the dean, but after they gave me that, I didn't tell them, but I'm pregnant. And instead of the bad reception that I got in Carnegie Mellon, he said, no, perfect, great. And I also got a grant. And that was another thing that was pretty important to me. I gave a talk in, I guess, the equivalent of an Informs. And after the talk came to me, the director of what was then the OR division in NSF. And he told me, I like your talk a lot. Submit a grant proposal. And the program was disaster mitigation. And I told him, but that has nothing to do with disaster. He said, don't worry about it. Trust me. And I submitted this proposal and I got NSF grant, which for someone as young as me, that was like fantastic, earth-shattering. So I came to Berkeley with NSF grant and I bought off the first semester when I gave birth. But so when I came to Berkeley, I wanted to prepare my courses, and I had again soliciting from various companies projects for the course. And I remember distinctly that I contacted Del Monte, that's the canned goods and bananas company, and they invited me to their headquarters in San Francisco, and I was pretty much 9 months pregnant. And I go there and I go into the conference room and I open it, and then everybody's sitting there, all the vice presidents are there, and nobody blinks. And we start the discussion as if there is no belly there at all. And I thought, boy, do I love California. It was such a stark difference from Pittsburgh. And indeed, it was, it still is, yes. California has a lot of positives to it. So I felt very good about it. And yeah, the rest is history. Berkeley is a great place. Yeah.
All thanks to
and we are hiring now. So.
And all thanks to a last minute phone call that changed your life.
Yes. So for me, many things like complete serendipity that I stumbled upon something.
I was very, very surprised to learn that you had to give a presentation to, I don't know, 200 people at Stanford, right? When applying for a job position. That's sort of an unusual thing, right?
I don't think I ever figured out what happened there, but it didn't matter. And then they offered me a visiting professor position, which was obviously not acceptable compared to Berkeley tenure track.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
And you attended a few classes at Berkeley, didn't you?
Yeah, coming to Berkeley was great. And I mean, Kraupp was there. And as I discovered, Manuel Blum was there. He actually moved to Carnegie. But taking courses from them was amazing. I mean, Dick Kraupp, his teaching is simple and so clear, just fantastic, and very deep understanding. And he is totally capable of conveying it to the audience in very simple terms. And Manuel Blum, I love these courses. He was always like getting confused. He doesn't know what's happening. So I was jumping out of my skin. I'm not the only one. The others jumping out of our skins to explain to him. Yeah.
And you developed a close friendship with Ilan Adler after arriving at UC Berkeley. Do you have any anecdotes to share about him?
He's my next door colleague, and I still meet him regularly. So at the time I came to Berkeley in the business school, and pretty shortly after I came, the chair of the IEOR department met me to discuss maybe moving to the IEOR, and then we had a discussion. It would be complicated, so better to do it after I get tenure. And the business school was great. I mean, they let me the first year teach a course in approximation algorithm that obviously no business student attended. So I loved being at the business school. But a bit later, they closed down our departments or group Ph.D. program, so there were less opportunities. And I did know people from IEOR, some of them I was their advisor, but not officially, because officially you have to be from the department. But there was a suggestion, I'm pretty sure that Glassi arranged it, that I will teach this course that I'm teaching now graph and network flows. Prior to that, Gale taught it and Kraupp taught it. So that was my first time to teach this course. And I had like the most stunningly amazing class of people. I had people like Ron Shamir in the class that became a very extensive co-author of mine and a friend, and David Shmoys that became a co-author of mine and a friend, and others like Mauricio Rezande and other names as well. I mean, amazing people in this class. And I was really I still do enjoy myself teaching a class like that. And among other things, I was teaching transportation problem. So it's a network flow problem, and the objective can be anything, the right-hand side can be anything, and it is known how to do it independently of the right-hand side or independently of the objective function. And I said in class, and I have a conjecture that you cannot do it independently of both. That is, you cannot solve it in so-called strongly polynomial time. And I go to the cafe with one of my PhD students, Malek Khelaf, and Ilan is there. And he asked what's happening. And I said, well, I just taught this class and I made this conjecture. And he said, I'm willing to bet against it. I said, okay. So I then and there, and my student was the witness to that. We decided I'm pretty sure it was spring 86. So we decided that if it gets resolved by the end of the year, 86, so soon, then the loser will take the winner to this famous and expensive restaurant called Japanese in Berkeley. Japanese downstairs. The downstairs is a fixed menu that changes every day, and it's extra expensive. And if it gets resolved after December, then the loser will take the winner to the upstairs, which is like standard restaurant, still expensive, but you choose items on the menu, not that as expensive as the downstairs. Okay, and in the summer, I started working on showing that you cannot do it in strongly polynomial time. I put a lot of work into that. I was pretty convinced you cannot do it. And I guess sometime in the summer or the fall, Laci Lovash announced that Eva Tardos found a strongly polynomial algorithm for network flow or for linear programming that the constraint matrix coefficients are binary or small, which is makes me wrong. I mean, and to give myself credit, I told Ilan. He didn't know that. I told him. And we took him to this restaurant. We had a great time there.
Yeah, so you lost a bet after all.
I lost the bet, yes. But I was doing all of this work to show that it cannot be done in strongly polynomial time. And it paid off because I found that, and I met Jim Renegar at the time. He's a professor at Cornell now, but he was a student in Berkeley. And I knew of his work and I discussed it. So I took some major aspects of his work and I used it to show that there are very simple problems if the objective function is separable, nonlinear, non-quadratic. For quadratic, I couldn't show it. Then you cannot do it in strongly polynomial time using the arithmetic complexity model. So this is a very strong result because it's impossible, something that is impossible. And among other things, so if you have network flow that is nonlinear and non-quadratic, then you cannot hope to solve it in strongly polynomial time. And of course, people want to know about linear programming, if you can solve linear programming in strongly polynomial time or not. And I had also other works with students in which we show that certain type of problems with quadratic objectives you can solve in strongly polynomial time. So the quadratic is a case in between. And this is an important theorem, but unfortunately, that's one of my disappointments with the refereeing process. I submitted it to Math of OR. They definitely took their time, but they wanted me to change the name from impossibility of strongly polynomial time for this type of problems to upper and lower bounds to allocation problem. So allocation problem is a very simple optimization problem. The constraint is just the sum of the variable less than or equal to something, and which I used as the building block for that. And I mean, you don't argue. They say it's accepted, but you have to change the name. So I changed the name, and it caused huge damage, actually, because people don't know what's in it. And in fact, I got and still do get a lot of mileage from people making mistakes that they solve. They claim they have this algorithm running time, which is strongly polynomial, and I just read the abstract and I know that they are wrong because I know it cannot be done. And I caught people quite often with that. And some of them were happy to learn it, that they made a mistake. Some not so happy. But anyway, so this came from the challenge that Ilan posed, and we still bet on a very regular basis on the result of elections, on various things. Yeah.
All right. You mentioned Mauricio Rezende at some point.
Yes.
So I met him just now at the Brazilian War Symposium. I was a plenary speaker where I spoke about the subject to podcast, and he was the chair of the session. So it was great. And I mentioned that I was going to interview you, and he got so happy. I mean, in fact, he guessed because I said, I'm interviewing someone from Berkeley. And he said, "Oh, Dorit." I said, "Yeah."
Yeah, he was great. He was not my student. He was Ilan's student.
But he took that course with you. So
yes. And there was a conference in Brazil, in Universidade Católica in Rio, and Ilan and I went to Brazil, and we booked some hotel. I don't remember, something was wrong, and we went. I think I didn't like it, so I wanted to go to another hotel. And we went to this other hotel, and there are some people in the entrance who say, "Professor Adler, Professor Hochbaum, who are these?" Mauricio brother and his wife. Who knows how they found us? Totally mystery. And because we ourselves, we didn't know we'll be at that hotel. And they were so incredible, gave us such a great time, invited us to their house in the mountains, and we went out to all sorts of music events. I mean, it was great.
Yeah, glad to know that.
Yeah.
And the 1980s was a very busy period for linear programming, and being at UC Berkeley at that time allowed you to witness many things firsthand, especially regarding Narendra Karmakar, who completed his PhD there, and the development and dissemination of the interior point method. What are your memories from those years?
So actually, I knew him. He came to my business school office to discuss. I believe that was the main topic of his dissertation, which was an approximation algorithm for bin packing, and it was an additive approximation. It was very nice and innovative, and he came to talk to me about it. And he then graduated and started working at IBM. And then he wrote the paper on interior point method. And one of my students in IEOR was doing a qualifying exam. And at the time we had qualifying exam, the committee would assign the student a paper. And the committee was Dick Kraupp, Steve Smale, Ilan Adler, and myself. And the choice, I think Kraupp chose it, this interior point paper of Karmakar. And I want to add that in 1979, the ellipsoid method of Hachian came out. And I wrote a paper, and the paper was observation about the empirical performance of, I called it, of Hachian's algorithm. And the idea was that the way it is set up as a system of inequalities, that it's either infeasible or there is one solution. And the thing with one solution is important because the whole idea, the fantastic idea of Hachian is that the solution is not continuous, but it's actually on a grid, on a finite grid of polynomial accuracy. And the idea of the ellipsoid is that you can magnify, and therefore, if you have the ellipsoid less than the minimum volume that fits in the grid, and it's not feasible, then there is nothing there. So my paper there was saying that the empirical performance, the worst case performance, will be the same as the practical performance, which actually is the case. So
it's a very interesting result, that actually.
Although it's a fantastic algorithm and gave rise to all sorts of things with the separation and being able to deal with exponential number of constraints, and of course, proving at last that linear programming is polynomial, it really does not work in practice. You don't want to solve linear programming with that. So my student was presenting this interior report, and it has the same idea. I mean, it works also on the resolution on the grid. I mean, it starts nice, go inside. It's a totally different approach, but it ends when it gets the resolution. So at the end of it, Kraupp said that Karl wants it to be implemented, and how about my student will implement it? I say, no, I don't want him wasting his time. It's the same as will take a very long time. It was famous last words. Well, I'm glad he didn't implement it. People that implemented it didn't fare so well under Karl once he moved to AT&T. Yeah.
Yeah. And so now let's discuss your many remarkable research contributions from the past 40 years. Let's start with your work on the K-center problem with David Shmoys, which has received over 1,300 citations on Google Scholar. What makes this work so impactful, and would you say he's the best possible approximation of an ideal academic collaborator for you?
So he was in this class that I was telling about, and David was always, and still is, knows everything. Even as a student, he knew everything that's going on. And he was walking with me back to my business school building, it was Barrows Hall. And while we are walking, he tells me about a new result for Hamiltonian circuits that uses square head of the graph. And I stopped and I told him, David, this will work for two approximation for K-center problem. Let's go to my office. We were sitting in my office. Within an hour, we figured it out. Took long time to write it and submit it. And I'm quite sure that we submitted it to something like Fox and it was rejected. Then we ended up, it was published, but then we did lots of other things. And the collaboration with David was always, actually, I met him fairly recently, I think a couple of weeks ago. Super happy collaboration. I would call him. I have an idea at 4:00 in the morning. I would call him. And just to have the link of our thinking, and he's so brilliant. So it's been really great. And we have lots and lots of papers together.
Yeah, that's so lovely to hear. I mean, when you find a collaborator that you can, share ideas, and also there's this strong connection, even a, very strong friendship, it makes everything special.
Yeah,
I would say. Yeah. And what about your work on monotone integer programs with two variables per inequality?
Okay, so that goes back to, I told you about the paper of Nemhauser and Trotter, that they have the linear programming for relaxation for vertex cover solved as a minimum cut. And although you can prove, and I repeated the proof in my paper on approximation for vertex cover, but it's very non-intuitive. And there was an ISMP conference, I think in Amsterdam it was, and I was sitting in the audience next to George Nemhauser, And I even remember what the talk was about volumes of polytopes. And I was not listening. I was thinking, okay, George Nemhauser is here. And what about this vertex cover? Why? How can you get to it? And then while there, it dawned on me something that will work for any integer programming that has two variables per inequality. To split them into two, and then you get, I won't explain how, but then you get, for any integer programming on two variables, you get a formulation that has opposite signs. So opposite sign, you have two variables with opposite signs. That's, I call monotone. It has to do with relevance to some other systems. It has to do with grid also. But the coefficients can be anything. They don't need, of course, in the case of vertex cover, the coefficients are 1. Mm-hmm. You can reduce it to a linear program that has 1, 1, and 1 minus 1 at most in every constraint. And the right-hand side can be some constant, and greater or equal or less than or equal. All of them, you can do that. Mm-hmm. The only drawback is that if the integer like has u values, u is like the upper bound, there are u nodes in the graph, u variables in this formulation and u nodes. So it's not polynomial. However, Lagarius showed, for another problem, I don't want to become too technical, he showed it's NP hard. And the problem is exactly monotone integer program for the values of the variable can vary in a range. And when Lagarius did it, he didn't realize that it's actually weakly NP hard. That is, if the bounds on the variables are small, then so is the complexity of solving it. So it's like knapsack problem with small right-hand side, but definitely you cannot remove it. So in that sense, you can't do any better than that. But all the applications, I've done zillions of applications of these things, all of them are in binary variables. So this question does not even show up. So if you have an integer program in two variables per inequality, minimization, for all of them, I can give you a two approximation algorithm because I can solve it in half integers and round it up to a two approximation. And this is, you just need to see if you can formulate it with two variables. And people were at the time doing all sorts of problems that had very complicated proofs with linear programming and then randomized rounding to get or to satisfiability, mean to satisfiability. Is a problem that had a separate paper about it, how to get to approximation. And this is just two variables, you're done. It's two approximation. You know what the graph is, you know how to solve the minimum cut, and you got it. So this all originated from sitting next to Nemhauser. And later, I extended it to three variables per inequality.
Yeah, that's exactly my next question. You also work on monotone integer programs with three variables per inequality, for which you derived very important theoretical and practical results, and demonstrated their applicability to a broad range of problems, including team collaboration, pattern recognition, document summarization, community detection, and image segmentation.
Yeah, so not too long after that, my primary objective at the time was the approximation algorithms. So I showed that if you add a third variable, but it's not arbitrary because integer programming is three variables, any integer programming is. But if you have two variables and the third variable can appear only in one constraint, more or less, that's the structure of, and it's monotone if the two variables have opposite signs and the third variable, whatever. So there is a minor extra restriction, that's minimization. The third variable has to have positive coefficient. If it's maximization, a negative coefficient. So this I showed for in cases that you can do two approximations and also other type of approximations. But just the fact that if it has opposite sign coefficient, so I would take any integer programming like that and I would make it monotone, and then I got the half integer solutions and got integer. But then it dawned on me that actually, who cares about the approximations? There are many formulations in which they are monotone. And in many cases, people don't even notice that you can solve it in polynomial time. So just if you have a formulation like that, you know, without doing anything, that it is solvable in polynomial time. And then there was another, you mentioned the image segmentation, etc. So I knew, because I was working on something else, there could be links to image segmentation. And then I had another happy coincidence that, or serendipity, that a group in our nuclear engineering were looking for someone in pattern recognition. They were going to, for a grant in on homeland security, detecting threats, domestic nuclear threats. And our chair recommended me and I joined them. And boy, we had a lot of money, a lot of money, and they know how to spend it. I mean, I couldn't even reach their level because they spend it, they buy stuff. I just spend it on people. So I was able to get a postdoc and to support lots of students as research assistants. So the whole thing took off and did a lot of image segmentation, and a lot of the stuff was using this structure of monotone constraints. So for instance, we had something to detect, you send taxis in a place like Manhattan and the taxis carry a detector. So if it happens to go by source, it gives a signal. And it can make mistakes. There are issues of sometimes there is a fault. But if you have enough traffic, and in Manhattan you do, then we showed, and that's again with implementation and everything, that we have a very fast algorithm that essentially works in real time, even for a big place, that from the cumulative, once the cumulative effect of alerts at certain areas, it shows you where it is, and even if it's moving, still shows you where it is. So lots of applications of this nature we were able to implement very fast. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see the variety of problems that can be modeled using these monotone integer programs with 2 and 3 variables per inequality. And I'm really amazed by the impactful research that you did. First of all, to come up with the results, the theoretical results is already very impressive, but then find the applications and devise the algorithms and show how they work so well. It's just mind-boggling. I mean,
yeah, it's a lot of fun too.
Yeah. You initially struggled to publish your first result on the topic. I mean, with monotone integer programs with 3 variables per inequality, but later received a helping hand from the late Jakob Kraupp from Denmark, right?
Yes, I submitted it somewhere. I actually remember where, but I won't say. They rejected it. Maso 4R. They rejected it. And I thought it was a great paper. And I usually don't do well with rejection, so I just crawl up into dark space. But I was giving like keynote and plenary talks about this. And one of them was in Euro conference, and Jakob Kraupp was there, and we knew each other from before. He was a very good friend. And he said, how about you submit it to IEOR, European Journal of Operations Research? And I said, well, I submitted it, and then it took them 2 years, and then they rejected it. He said, no, we'll do it fast. Submit it, and I don't know if you can say that, and we'll accept it. But he did. And so that saved me all of the agony of revisions, and it's a very good paper. Mm-hmm. But anyway, so it got published relatively short time after I wrote the paper, which is not the case with every paper that I wrote, with many of them. The
And
better they are, the more time they take.
And years later, you received an honorary doctorate from the University of Copenhagen.
Yeah, that was great. Amazing event because I received it from the Queen of Denmark. And It was just
Wow.
unbelievable. The most onerous task was to go with my girlfriends to choose outfits to wear for the 3 days extravaganza because there were many different events and each one required different outfits, and it was amazing.
Yeah, I'm sure you had a lot of fun.
And I
Yes.
learned some Danish that summer. Yeah.
You really have a strong connection with Denmark, don't you?
Yes, yes. I always felt at home there.
Yeah.
Great
And
people.
and tell me about your research activities in the field of neuroscience.
It's hard to jump to it right away, but in image segmentation, there are certain problems that people solve with the spectral method, with eigenvectors. And there are some theoretical reasons why, but these are not the best methods to solve this. And I showed something related to this monotone integer programs that you can solve it much better, so faster and better quality. And in general, I tell my friends, in this case, my son, that anything that is done with the spectral method, I can do better. So he himself is in neuroscience, but he had people, I mean, he was still a student, some professors there that had a project on in neuroscience. It's detecting active neurons in movies that are calcium imaging movies that are taken from live brain of a mouse, say, while doing certain activities. And
At Harvard, right? This?
at Harvard, yes. And they also were using spectral methods. So he told them about me. And anyway, we got together without my son, just me and those people. And it seemed like it's a good project. And I worked on it with my PhD student at the time, Quico, great PhD student. And I had a visiting postdoc at the time, Roberto Assin, that I still work with. So we were doing this project. We got very good results. And then there is a benchmark that you submit your algorithm, and we won. We became the leader. It's automatic testing, and we became the leader. Yeah, so we kept our leadership for 1 year. Unfortunately, we were, I told Quico we have to write the paper and send it to Nature. I like to say that he dragged his feet, but he probably has another. At any rate, it took almost a year, and then we submitted the paper and we wrote in the abstract, and with the people from Harvard, we wrote in the abstract that this is the leading algorithm in this benchmark. And coming January, we were dethroned with convolutional neural network. But if we'll have time, I'll explain that it is not fair. It's not a better algorithm. It just...
Yeah, go ahead, please.
At any rate, with the Nature, they wrote, well, you're not the best anymore, so rejected. So the convolutional neural network, like any machine learning, pretty much learns from ground truth. What is ground truth? Not necessarily ground truth. What people think is ground truth. That is, they get this movie and people are annotating it. What are the active neurons? They can't look at 50,000 frames. So they compress the whole thing into one image. And they basically say anything that is bright is an active neuron. And that's what the convolutional network did, but that's not what we got. I mean, we got for some of them that were bright, we did not say that they are active neurons. And indeed, if you look at the movie, it's a flat signal. It's bright, but it's flat. It's not, doesn't have a signal. Our algorithm actually looked at the signal and looked at the correlations between signals. They don't. They just look at whatever people are the ground truth, which is like a major problem with machine learning in general. So anyway, they disowned us, and we ended up publishing it elsewhere. But that was an interesting story. Yeah.
Yeah, and a fascinating application. I mean, who gets to work in neuroscience?
Yeah, it has lots of other amazing applications in neuroscience, but I mean, I won't take too much time on that already.
Yeah. So, Dorit, you are one of the worldwide leaders when it comes to max flow mean cut algorithms. You have made key contributions in the field, including the pseudoflow algorithm. On one hand, it seems that this algorithm became very popular among the mining community because of its application to the open pit mining problem, and you even received a bouquet of flowers because of that. On the other hand, it took 10 years for your paper to be published in Operations Research after it was first presented at the IPCO conference in 1998. Could you briefly summarize the story behind this work?
Yeah, so I was in the business school, and I had a colleague in the business school that we met in the mailroom. And he said, and I was familiar with the open pit mining problem, and I was teaching it in class because it's equivalent to maximum closure problem that is solvable with minimum cut. And it's amazing. I mean, this is a result by Picard, and it's like totally stunning that very non-intuitive application of minimum cut. So he said, I do consulting to 3M, and in the mining, they do open pit, but then they have, for the copper, they have the prediction in the market of the changing prices, and they need to solve for each one. Each one takes them a day because it's like 500,000 blocks. And I said, no, you can do it with parametric cut, and there are good algorithms for minimum cut, and it shouldn't take so long. And he says, no, we do it with Lerks-Grossman algorithm. So that's the first time I heard it. And he gave me a paper from 1964 by Lerks and Grossman on the open pit mining problem. And I was super excited to see it because it had nothing to do with flows, the paper, and with cuts. And I have this conjecture that still has not been proved, that you can solve minimum cut much more efficiently than maximum flow, but all the algorithms that for minimum cut first solve maximum flow. By the way, minimum cut is ST cut. You have one node here, one node there. If it's minimum cut without specification, it's a different story. So I said, no, it has to be done. And I looked at the paper, and immediately I saw that it's not polynomial. It seemed extremely brilliant, the thinking there. And it is not polynomial. And then with a student, we did an implement. Actually, I got data from mining companies, and we were showing that we ran push relabel algorithm, then we do it very fast, and we didn't do it parametrically because there was not a parametric implementation, but we showed much better results. And then we showed that this algorithm can, by doing scaling, runs in polynomial time. But then I thought, but how to run it better with, so I found out how to run it in strongly polynomial time, and I published that paper. And that is on closure graphs. Closure graphs are graphs that, other than source and sink, adjacent arc, everything is infinity. So these are the type of arcs that you get in maximum closure. And the mining industry started to use it because it was super efficient, and also because they could relate to the terminology there. They have like the bench level, how deep it is, and there is some labels that relate to it. So the overall structure was fairly familiar to them. So they started using it. And I had a lot of communications with people that have consulting companies, that have open pit mining software project, and from mining companies. And So one owner of a software mining company, he sent me the bouquet of flowers that I got one day to the office in the business school. And another one sent me salmon. All salmon.
Okay.
Uh, he said he fishes for salmon, but he had to buy it because otherwise you cannot send it. So that was my compensation. And then it really bothered me, this thing, why only closure graphs? Then I found how to do it for general graphs, and I was super excited by it, and I wrote a paper, and how to do it also parametrically. So the parametric is another story that is Gallo, Grigoriadis, and Tarjan have a seminal paper in 1989 that shows that if you have a parametric flow network, you can solve for all values of the parameter in essentially the same running time as for single run, but it uses push relabel. It depended on this algorithm. You cannot do it with any algorithm. But the PseudoFlow algorithm could do it also. So there are two algorithms. And my PseudoFlow algorithm was implemented. One of my students implemented it. And I started to use it all over the place. So then I wrote a paper for publication, and it got rejected several times. And it took 10 years before eventually it appeared in operations research.
What an agony should have been.
Yeah, it was. I wasted a lot of time there on revisions and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But the main thing with the Lerx-Grossman, so at some point, I think around 2000 or maybe earlier, I get a phone call that someone says that he is a student of Lerx, and that they want to talk to me. They read my stuff and they want to talk to me. And it turns out the Grossman guy died. And Lerx and Grossman wrote the paper while they were at IBM. And IBM, that's what he told me, IBM wanted them to find applications so they can sell computers or service of computers. So that's how they came up with it, which is really ingenious what they came up with. So I had some Siam conference, I think, in Toronto, and he and his wife lived in Toronto, so they came to get me, and they took me for dinner and everything. And then there was, possibly it was math programming in Montreal, or another conference, and I was presenting this algorithm, and I invited him and introduced him to the audience. So this has been, and he gave me a whole pack. I mean, very creative person, but he was never in academia. So he gave me a whole pack. He said, I make better use of this than him, and I have it in a drawer somewhere.
What an amazing story.
Yeah, it was great. Yes.
You are an endless source of incredible stories, Dorit. I should say that. And again, talking about a fantastic story, I know you have a great one involving Maurice Curran and Eva Tardus, which can be considered a perfect example of serendipity. Would you mind sharing it?
So I was at a conference in Graz. It was in Graz. And I was presenting actually joint work that I have with Jim Orlin and Ravi Ahuja. And I was presenting it in the conference. And then there was a break. And Maurice Curran was there. And I know him for many years. He's one of the geniuses of max cut, min flow. No, max flow, min cut, obviously. And he came to me during the break, and he told me something that he has with Picard, but it's not written. And I told him, but this can be implemented in polynomial time. And he said, well, that was the end of the break. He said, I'm busy. And I sat there for the rest of the day, work it out. I saw every detail works, but you need parametric cut procedure for that. And I had to leave the next morning for the airport, and I stayed all night. I remember I stayed all night and I wrote a draft of the paper and sent it to him for approval. We ended up, I added some minor stuff because I gave some talks and people suggested some other stuff for trees and stuff like that. But basically, it was what I wrote overnight. So I sent it for publication, and it took time, but it eventually appeared. So I'm sitting at the cafe. So until the pandemic, I was pretty much every day in the cafe next to my office building in Berkeley. People knew I was there, and they would come to see me for office hour and stuff like that. So I was always in the cafe. And I was sitting there, and I see Eva Tardos, whom I know. She's married to David Shmoys, and I know her independently as a researcher. And obviously, she ruined my bet. Strongly polynomial. So she says, "What are you doing?" And I said, I show her this thing with Maurice Keren. And she says, "Oh, there is this Markov Random Field in image segmentation, which is a generalization, basically, of what we did, the convex closure." So she told me about the work that's being done there. And so all of it pretty much was published in journals related to image segmentation. And I looked at that, and I see that they don't know how to solve it in polynomial time. For each for each color, they have a separate minimum cut. They integrate, but the network is not polynomial. So I was able to show an extension of the basic result. So the basic result is that you take in the convex closure, you have convex functions on each node. It depends on the value. So it's not just 0, 1 as it is in the standard closure problem. So you take the derivatives of this function, and they are monotone, and you said if it's positive, the derivative adjacent to source, if it's negative, adjacent to sink, and that gives you a parametric flow network, and you can find all the solutions then. So this was the result of convex, and the Markov random field is let's say you have an image, it has certain color for each pixel, and now you're going to change it because you think there are errors there. You say you want uniform color area. So you say, if I'm going to change, I have to pay deviation because the best that I know is what I got. So there is some penalty for that. And then there is penalty for adjacent pixels that are different from each other. So that's a simple case of the Markov random field. So the adjacent pixels have another penalty function. So it's a trade-off. So you get like uniform color areas, but the area, if the penalty for adjacency is very high, then everything is one color. If it's very low, then everything doesn't change. But you can hit the right balance in between with the penalty function, and then it becomes non-trivial, and it's pretty much cleans the image. And I showed many applications in tumor detection and brain imaging that you can get fantastic results, not only in terms of running time, but in terms of compared to other techniques that are being used, many of them spectral techniques. So I wrote this paper and submitted it to JACM, which is a leading journal in computer science, and they almost instantly published it. I was very gratified. It's amazing. Actually, few years before the paper with Keren that this was based on was published. So, journals can do sometimes a lot of damage by dragging the process. Yeah.
Yeah. At least the experience with this submission was
it was amazing.
More pleasing. Yeah.
And it has zillions of applications that I found out later.
Yeah, and you even demonstrated how Markov random fields can be applied to evaluate NSF projects and also in the semiconductor industry. Could you describe these applications?
So with the NSF project, so I was on a panel, and it's true. So when you are on a panel, the way you evaluate the projects, the proposals, is that each reviewer gets a subset, usually within their expertise, to review, and they give a score to it between 1 and 5. 1 is poor, very poor, 5 is excellent, and everything in between. And usually it goes like you take averages, which is kind of common. And that's just the starting discussion, obviously. It's not, you go through the low ones, depending on the director of the program, and then the difficulties once you get to the better ones, how to decide. And we had someone on the committee that, and it's true, everything he got, he gave excellent to, the score 5. So that meant that those that happened to fall in his part were doing extremely well, regardless of what the other, and there were huge discrepancies. And I remember who was the director. I went to the corridor with him and I told him, you can't do it. You can't just rely. And he said, you have to convince him to change. But he didn't, he refused to be convinced. So what does it have to do with the Markov Random Field? I told you with the pair, it's called separation. So you can take into consideration for each reviewer, first of all, they don't see everything, but what they see, you can interpret the relative. So in his case, everything is excellent or the relative is 0. Everything is the same. The difference is the same. So you take the difference that each reviewer says or the preference, and you take it into consideration. And now you want to come up with a decision that will violate as little as possible the preferences of the reviewer, of all the reviewers. And the same model works for it, with the same minimum cut parametric application works for it, and you can solve it. And also we add also scores. So we have also consideration of the scores. So because like he said, everything is excellent, but this is the same as saying everything is poor. So we want also to include the score value. And especially with my student, Eric Moreno, who was another great student, we did a lot of work on that. We did country credit risk, we did student paper competition. We did all sorts of things that were like decision-making by a group, and to find these two, they agree. And the value of it was, it gives you an optimal solution, but that's, who knows what's optimal, because it depends on the penalty functions that you give. But when you get a solution, you get those penalties. So for instance, with the student paper competition, I gave a talk at MIT, and there was sitting there one faculty that was running the student paper competition, and he got excited and he gave us the data, not knowing what are the papers and who are the judges. And when he gave him the solution, we pointed out that there is a huge discrepancy, huge penalty associated with one judge that behave very differently from the others. And he looked at it and he removed this judge from the competition because he concluded that this judge was trying to manipulate the system. The point is that there's so much data, you can't look at it and see this phenomenon. But the solution tells you that there are these discrepancies. And that's the most important part. Like we did also the country credit risk evaluation by institutional investor and several others. And we checked it and they were pretty consistent, but the big penalty was for Russia. Now, the data was early 2000, and if I'm not mistaken, it was 2005 or 6. But it was not discrepancy because they thought differently. All of them agreed that Russia is a terrible risk, but is it totally awful, or maybe just terrible. I mean, the degree of how bad it is, that varies. So that's okay. But with the other cases, the discrepancy tells you something about the disagreement or agreement between the reviewers or the decision makers. Yeah.
And what about the semiconductor industry application?
So this is for yield prediction, and I had actually, it was the idea of the student who is now professor in Toronto. It was his idea to apply that. So you have yield prediction, that is, you have a semiconductor, you have a wafer on which you have multiple chips that are being printed. And if there is a defect, usually it's a neighborhood effect. That is, it because of physical reasons, there is dust, and if the dust falls in one place, likely more will fall in the same place. And there are different models that try to do it as a function of the radius, probabilistic model as a function of the radius, the distance from the center, etc. But this, what we did instead, was kind of like image segmentation to try to get clusters that are very similar to each other. And then in each cluster, and they can be in, so usually those that are tend to be, but there is only a sample. So in the sample where they have high defects, we find the area of it. And this, we are able to use the models for yield, but separately for each one of them, because their distribution of defects is different. And this gave like huge improvement in the yield prediction. Yeah.
Yes, I get so impressed by the amount of applications regarding Markov Random Fields, and I don't think many people are aware of that. Yeah. Okay, now that we've learned about your extensive body of work, let's change topics. And I would like to know, what are your current hobbies?
Current hobbies, extreme cooking. And this is something I've been good at it for a long time, and my kids inherited it from me, and are very involved, especially my older one, very much into cooking. And otherwise, I hope to spend time with friends and with family and around great students. So I actually really enjoy being at the university and talking. Even undergraduates, I start teaching them, and then they light up when they hear about all of these amazing things with duality. And I mean, I think simplex is just magic. And I love to do that. And then we sit, and sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes there is some brilliant idea and we jump into something else, and there is a great new stuff to talk about and maybe to do research on. So that's definitely something that I very much enjoy.
And what are your plans for the future?
To hopefully continue to do exciting work and to work with exciting people and hear interesting stuff, read good books, eat good food. Yeah, that's my plan.
Sounds very promising. And would you like to share any final thoughts with our young audience?
Yeah, so I tell my students just to keep their eyes open. You never know where some idea will come from, and to read and to listen and to try to get involved and try to make connections. And I tell them that in many cases I had an idea sitting like in the case center, but also other ideas or the vertex cover that were sitting in my head for sometimes years, sometimes many years. And eventually something came out of it. So not to give up. And I hope that many of them will go for academic positions and not give up on the difficulties in the publication process that is very challenging today. And as I understand, also the grant award process is very challenging. So to still not to give up, and that academia can be great.
All right. Yeah. Dorit, I don't know how to thank you enough. I mean, you were just a wonderful person. I mean, and certainly one of the smartest people I ever had the chance to interact with. And I mean, what you've done in terms of research is it's out of this world, and your enthusiasm, your passion for your work is just so inspiring. And listening to all these stories and how you talk about it in it's so much passion. It's really really incredible. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being a good interviewer, and you're overstating it about me, but
No,
I'll give you a
definitely not.
And thank you very much.
Yeah, Dorit, thanks a lot. It was really a wonderful experience to get to know you better, and I'm sure the listeners and viewers would be really thrilled, just as I am, to get to know your story. So thanks a lot. Take care, especially of your health, and looking forward to reading your future work.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao.